Welcome, all of you, to today's webinar. I am absolutely thrilled to have an expert here to talk about one of the most important issues when it comes to AI in education. For those who don't know me, my name is Amelia Vance. I am the founder and president of the Public Interest Privacy Center and AASA's Student and Child Privacy Center. Both PIPC and the Student and Child Privacy Center work to provide free resources and as much information as we can on all things student and child privacy. So now we're going to jump right in to today's topic. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Gretchen Shipley.
Thank you so much, Amelia, and for all of those who are joining us today. My name is Gretchen Shipley, and I am an education lawyer. I'm with F3 Law. We're an education law firm, and we work with about 500 school districts from across the country and higher ed. And the goal today is to be really direct and provide you all a basic checklist of what we feel you need to know from a legal perspective on the use of AI in education. I'm thrilled you've joined us today. I encourage you to share this information with your colleagues. And what's interesting is I go to a lot of conferences. I just went to a big AI conference. On Friday was National AI Literacy Day. And I see a lot of vendors, AI software companies doing really cool things, wowing educators and administrators about what AI can do in district operations. And I don't see a lot of folks like myself there navigating the legal liability issues. And I know it's not as sexy and exciting, but it is very important. And so I want to help you all implement AI, which is a really positive development education, but in a safe and responsible way. And that is why I'm just thrilled that Amelia invited us to be here today to talk through these things. So there is room for questions. I believe you put them in the Q&A section, and that will be monitored. And my time here is to benefit you all. So please ask the questions. I want to make sure I'm answering the concerns that you have. But I'm just going to go through a few basic slides and talk through basically like a checklist of what your team should really be taking a look at. So let's see. I'm going to dive right into it. Here's my picture. Again, I put my email address on here. If there's questions you don't want to share in the chat or you have some follow-up questions, let me know. I work with a lot of school districts on developing their guidelines and their contract review procedures, so feel free to reach out. Okay, but I want to dive right into it. A big question that we get a lot, well, a common phrase is, let's ask the IT guy. And you all, I keep telling school districts this, I work with a lot of superintendents, this is a cabinet level decision. AI and the role of AI in education impacts all levels of district operations. And I just really want to underscore that with you all and give you some examples of things that are happening, the ways it's being implemented, but it also goes to your district communications and how you're pushing this out to all your different departments to make sure they're doing it in a safe and responsible way. And I have some kind of horror stories I can share with you about when AI got rolled out too quickly and they didn't kind of dot all their I's and check their T's. You know, my job as a lawyer is to review the contracts, and the devil's in the details sometimes. And so I'll share with you some of those stories. But okay, the first area of district operations that I want to mention is it's not always just students using ChatGPT in the classroom or your teachers wanting to use an AI platform in the classroom. It's also, there's a big push to use it in your business operations. You know, there's a economic crisis for a lot of school districts, and they're looking to streamline their district procedures. So the business department, some districts are pushing their payroll through AI tools. They're using it for efficiency. I've seen student transportation routing being done through AI. I'm working with the tech department on putting in a surveillance system that uses AI. And so some of the concerns there would be processing your payroll. Is it open generative AI where the data gets reshared? You're potentially putting financial information in there. You know, does it have bank account numbers, how direct deposit or whatever? The student routing. Is it, it's almost like your Uber app, you know, where it shows parents where the students are on their way home. Sounds really efficient, sounds great. It has a lot of safety benefits. But on the other hand, there's geolocation data being and the students are being physically tracked, there's gonna be questions on the other side with all of these. There's like a cost benefit analysis you need to do. And then the surveillance one I wanted to mention, I work with a school district that came to me and they said, Gretchen, I want to present to our board next week a surveillance system that uses AI. It can detect guns more so than the human eye, the shape of a gun. It also looks at license plates coming in and off and on campus, which we can do human trafficking, tracking and prevention. And I took a look at the contract and it was 90 pages long. And it used not only license plate readers and AI, but collected biometrics from students and also used a facial recognition software. I said, this looks like Big Brother. This may concern people in your community. It was also a $9 million contract. So I said, you really need to alert your board before they adopt this about the full scope of, the level of privacy and safety and security and do that cost benefit analysis. But anyway, so AI is not just in the classroom, it's your business department, it's your tech department, special education. And I know that is a subject of one of these future webinars. We're doing a whole webinar on it because there's a lot of misunderstanding possibly in that particular field. But we have a lot of parents who are requesting AI as an accommodation, like a note-taking app. We have a lot of special ed teachers who are using, let's say, ChatGPT to draft, or open generative AI to draft IEPs. And it's okay if information is de-identified, but what we don't want to be happening is that special education teachers might be drafting IEPs using a student's name, using maybe their disability status, their medical needs, really highly confidential information should not be reshared in that fashion. And so we need to make sure whatever our safety review protocol is, and we're going to get into those steps, it's shared out across these cabinet functions, or you have the special ed team part of that discussion. Just to talk real quick about the note-taking apps. So one of the fundamental questions we'll talk about in a minute, is it open AI? Is it resharing the data? And in the case of a note-taking app, a lot of business operations, special ed accommodation staff are using note-taking apps. They use AI to summarize your discussion, to take the notes, but that is being recorded. And we need to find out if it is an open generative platform where it's resharing the information, because then you have a real confidentiality concern. Also, a lot of these are legal meetings when it comes to special ed, and there's a lot of attorney-client privilege discussions, things of that nature. Leadership. I worked with the state of California to roll out an AI chatbot to all high school seniors. They wanted to use it to encourage them to apply for the FAFSA. Sounds great, but it was one of those situations where devil's in the details. Before it was rolled out, I took a look at the agreement and said, we need to pause and fine tune some of this. It was an emotionally intelligent chatbot that would openly engage with the students on any topic. And we implemented strategies about, why don't we limit the engagements to the actual FAFSA? What if they put a threat in there? Is there a way to monitor and respond to that? So again, I think the district leadership, in this case, the state of California, was really interested in doing something positive, like increasing FAFSA applications. But at the same time, we want to make sure that the tool we're putting in students' hands is not going to cause a district greater liability. So we went in and we shored that up before it was rolled out. Students, of course, it's a tremendous opportunity for future ready learners and to make sure that they can do prompt engineering. I'm not anti technology. I just want to help districts implement it responsibly. And last, staff. So what's happening a lot is that staffs go to ed conferences, technology conferences, and I applaud teachers who want to be innovative in the classroom, but they need to pause and maybe evaluate some of the safety risks of these tools. So we don't want teachers just putting it directly in the hands of students without doing this safety risk analysis that we'll walk through. Also labor related, your unions. I mean, if teachers get paid for a prep hour and now they can do their lesson planning in 30 seconds using ChatGPT or their sub plans, is that going to become a labor issue? So again, as you're doing your AI guidelines and you're developing those for your team and your district or your professional development, you want to have all of these voices at the table. So with that, I'm going to go into the terms and conditions you should be looking at, but again, Amelia or anybody in the Q&A, feel free to jump in. Oh, it looks like we might have a question already. Horror stories when it was introduced too quickly. I'll do my horror stories as we go, and then and if I get to the end and I haven't hit on them, I will. I'm trying not to talk badly about some of the clients I work with, but yes, I'll do the horror stories. Well, and one that I mentioned already, getting to the business operations. So it was an IT director asked me, can I come to their board meeting the next week? I'm going to be sharing this AI surveillance system. And when I looked at it and saw that there was 4 different ways that they're collecting data of students, and I'm in San Diego County in California, we're not far from the border. There's lots of people with concerns about, I mean, everybody has data privacy concerns, but we have a lot of people who might not be US citizens, and just the public perception that you are going to be collecting all this information was going to be horrifying. And the IT director didn't even realize it. He didn't read the contract. What he got was a 1-page statement of work on what a surveillance system can do. And it wasn't the full terms and conditions. I read I had asked them and asked the software vendor for those terms and conditions. And it turns out it was a $9 million contract over 5 years. And if they wanted to terminate early, maybe because their community got really upset about the data being collected, they still had to pay all $9 million. So that, I mean, that horror story was that district was this close to adopting the software that, if anything, was just gonna be expensive, and that they had no out, even if it, you know, their community couldn't stomach it. But I have more stories as we go on, so we'll do that. The next thing I wanted to share with you all, so this slide was really just the importance of using all district areas of operations. But this is just, again, reiterating what I'm saying about needing somebody to look at these terms and conditions, whether it's your outside legal counsel, it's your IT department, maybe it's your business department, but there should be a process in place already. You have lots of educational software that collects information from students, and you likely already have a vetting process for these tools. So you want to make sure that, one, that you have a process to vet the educational software, but that people know about it. Does your staff know that before they adopt an app or software into the classroom, that there's a process they should go through for somebody to review it? And that's what the checklist is today. Today is going to be going through those review steps. But do you have guidelines? Do you have a policy on AI or ed tech? Do you have guidelines for your staff? Do you do any sort of professional development? And then many school districts actually, once they vet educational software and say it's okay to use in the classroom, they'll publish a list for their staff and say, these are tools that have been approved, reviewed, and if something's not on this list, send it to us and we'll take a look at it. That really just streamlines the process and minimizes the chance that a teacher's going to go rogue and just put something into the hands of students that they don't have, that, you know, isn't necessarily safe, for example. So the other thing that I think a lot of teachers get tripped up on and school districts get tripped up on is free tools. And they think because it's free, they don't have to ask permission, but free isn't free. Software companies make money somehow, and it is usually that they are either reselling the data that they are collecting from the kids, or they're doing targeted advertising to the students. And in many states, targeted advertising is illegal, and so is selling their data. So again, and you'd be shocked, like, I'm an education lawyer, I just work with school districts. I know that inside out and backwards, but the software companies do not. So we often are having to, we work with Google and Amazon and all the big players, that we are educating them on student data privacy requirements. And Amelia is an expert in that area as well. So again, this slide is just to underscore how important it is that you have a district-wide system on reviewing tools. And then, you know, the next 2 slides are going to be exactly what to look for. But my job is often to help you prepare these guidelines, or we even do professional development for staff virtually, and help do the actual contract review process. Okay, so getting into contracts. I just want to also reiterate that when you accept terms and conditions, when you adopt a software, when you say you want to download an app, for example, do you agree to the terms and conditions? Okay, I never read them, and I'm a data privacy education lawyer. I get it that people aren't actually taking a look at those, but that is the contract the district's entering into. You are putting something in the hands of students that you all have accepted the terms and conditions and the responsibility for. And it might not be district-wide, it might be your staff member, but they are representing the district. So if a parent is going to come back and try to challenge the district, I mean, they can sue the school district over this, over violating their students' privacy, even if a teacher went on their own and accepted terms and conditions and put it into the classroom, which is why it's important for the district to be able to say, well, we trained our staff, we told them not to do this, or we had a vetting process. So what is the contract? It is the terms and conditions. It can also be a service agreement. If you have a software platform where, they sometimes have something called a service agreement. There can be a privacy statement that also is part of the terms. And sometimes you're actually licensing software. So I gave the example of the surveillance system where the IT person IT professional, I mean, it's like a chief technology officer said, come to my board meeting next week. He had a 1-page statement of work. And I said, where are the terms and conditions? Oh, they didn't give that to me. I said, can I take a look at that? That's what your board's approving. And I went and took a look at it, and there was a privacy statement, and there was a services agreement, and there was a licensing agreement. All of that makes up the contract. And so your team needs to make sure they are fully vetting all of this because again, there's a lot of times, and as we go through the checklist of things to look for, that they're missing terms or that there's real safety gaps. And so we just, again, my job isn't to say you can't use the tool. It's how do we go back to that software developer and say, can we tighten this up for education? So, okay, getting into the checklist. So the first thing I want to talk about is just generally data privacy. So if it is, so AI basically operates in 2 different ways. Artificial intelligence operates in 2 different ways. You may have an educational software that is just a closed universe. It works across your district school sites or in the classroom or within all district operations, and it's closed to your school. That pretty much keeps all educational records within the school district and your vendor. I mean, it's just your software vendor, school district. What is a bigger data privacy concern is open generative AI. And, I don't mean to pick on ChatGPT, but that's the one that's used really commonly. There is a version now that has that can be closed setting, but generally speaking, it is open generative AI, which means anything that is put into it, like a Google search bar, is reshared. And what AI does is it builds a knowledge base, and it's getting smarter and smarter. It's using the information that you input and resharing it with the universe. Well, student records aren't supposed to be reshared without parent permission or falling under a FERPA exception. So that's kind of step 1 is it open AI or is it closed AI? If it's open AI, there may be a privacy setting, and that is a feature that software vendors are quickly trying in the education space, are trying to adapt to and add because they're realizing that school districts are concerned about student data privacy. They want to be able to make it a closed universe. So check and see if there's a privacy setting. Even if it is closed AI, there are still student data privacy standards that need to be met both on a federal and state level. There are model student data privacy agreements. I'm sure your district already has a process in which your educational software looks at student data privacy standards. So they still need a privacy agreement, student data privacy agreement. And then if it's open, even if it's closed AI, so closed, open or closed, you need a student data privacy agreement. But if it's open AI, you may need parental permission on top of that. And that's what I want to explain in the next couple slides, is that before you can put open generative AI in the hands of students, you very well may need their parents' permission. And I know a lot of school districts maybe don't realize that yet, maybe doing it without asking parents. the challenge is going to be like, my job is to make sure you all aren't stepping into legal pitfalls and that you're going to be facing some sort of class action or something of that nature when it's just as easy to go out and get parental permission. I mean, it's not always easy, but it's highly recommended. And I'll explain why. So I'm going to do a little deep dive on FERPA for a minute. You all probably know the federal law, FERPA, Family Educational Rights Privacy Act, that covers educational records. Bear with me for a second, but I just want to explain to you why parental consent is probably the best course of action for open generative AI. The rule under FERPA, the baseline rule, FERPA is from the 1960s. It never contemplated technology, but what FERPA said was, before you can share a student's educational record, you need their parents' permission, unless there's an exception that applies. One of those exceptions, the school official exception, is where all your educational software typically falls. So you may have a student information system that houses all of their grades, their address, their contact information, disciplinary records. That student information system falls under the school official exception. You don't need parent permission to use a learning management system in the classroom. You don't need it for student information system because it falls under that exception. If you needed parent permission, it would be impossible to get 100% parent permission, and it wouldn't be able to operate. So, or wouldn't be very effective if you needed to go out and get that permission. So under the school official exception, you have to meet two requirements. It has to be that software has a legitimate educational interest in the student, and there is a limit to resharing. You cannot reshare it past the vendor unless it's just somebody like a sub-processor that helps them do their own business. So the challenge with open AI, like a Chat GPT or open generative AI, where it's resharing and rebuilding a knowledge base, is that it reshares the data. Any information, student information that is created or input, you want to do report cards and put personally identifiable information about a student into Chat GPT and ask for it to generate report card comments, you're sharing that student's record, especially if you put their name in it. And so to me, that goes against that exception that says you can't reshare it. Now, it's not that you can't use open generative AI for those purposes. It just reverts to that baseline rule under FERPA, which was, if you're going to reshare a student's record, you need parent permission. And it doesn't fit the exception because I don't think ChatGPT has a legitimate educational interest in the student, and it is resharing beyond the scope of what the district agreed to. It's building its knowledge base. So I know that's a little complicated if anybody has questions on parent permission, but the implications are, if you need parent permission, and we know that often school districts don't get 100% parent permission, I don't think open generative AI tools can be required in the classroom. It can be supplemental, like, hey, kids, you're drafting an essay. You're welcome to use the library, Google, or ChatGPT. But I don't think it can only be done through ChatGPT because you need parent permission, and not every parent might chime in and give that permission. And so it needs to be supplemental to their existing curriculum and not required. And again, I know that's gonna be a little tricky for school districts to navigate, but I do think from a legal standpoint, there could be some serious backlash if we're putting open generative AI into the hands of students without getting parent permission first. So that's kind of step one on the checklist, was the data privacy analysis. And now I'm gonna go into kind of the second point on the checklist. Oh, actually, before I do that, what does parental consent look like? I put this little checklist together. I have a model, parental consent form. If anybody wants to reach out, my email address was at the beginning of the slides, and I can put it in the chat also. But what does parental consent look like? It just needs to be informed consent. It is, what's the educational benefit of this open generative AI tool? Like, explain to the parents why you want to use it. Look, it's great. It can do cool things. What data might be collected and who it may be shared with. And then finally, if you're getting parents to sign off on giving their permission, I always say, go ahead and put a school district liability waiver in there. Like, and we're not going to hold the district responsible if my kid misuses it, or, so that is the key components of parental consent. But a lot of times I get the question, can we just do a blanket consent at the beginning of the year? We're kind of making up the rules as we go here, but is that really informed consent. The parents really know what they're agreeing to if it's just a blanket, my kid's allowed to use open generative AI. I think it should probably be a little bit more detailed on what kind of data is going to be collected from them and how it might be reshared. I think I mentioned at the beginning, there was this AI, and you asked for a horror story. It's a little bit of a horror story. There was an AI chatbot that the state of California wanted to put in the hands of high school seniors, and it said it was emotionally intelligent. And I have a 17-year-old boy. The emotional intelligence is like an oxymoron. Like, I'm like, what kind of engagement is this chatbot having with my student? On an emotional level, or there's a mental health crisis right now. What kind of information might students be putting into this chatbot, and what kind of information is coming back? So one thing we did there was we limited the knowledge base for that AI chatbot to just be about the FAFSA. So again, that the state of California wasn't doing anything wrong. It was just we were concerned about what kind of information might be generated from the AI and what kind of information might be input by a student. And we said, look, if the goal and intent is to help them complete the FAFSA application, why don't we limit their questions to being about the FAFSA and limit the responses to being about FAFSA? And if they have questions above and beyond that, they get, they go straight to a school counselor or guidance counselor, something of that nature. But that's a great segue into my second contract review point, which is if students are engaging directly with AI, a chatbot, an open environment, I think it is worth looking at the agreement to see if it is being monitored for students' threats to themselves, threats to the school. It's a very real crisis that a lot of school districts are under, because the problem, the legal standard for threat monitoring is if the district knew or should have known. And I wouldn't be surprised if parents say, my student was engaging with software or technology and said as clear as day, I'm going to hurt myself, or I'm coming to school to shoot it up, and nobody caught that. Nobody, or someone did catch it and they failed to tell the district, or someone at the district failed to follow up. That's a real horror story on many levels. I mean, not only do we care about saving student lives, but the legal liability. If a district knew or should have known that a student was going to hurt themselves or somebody else and didn't intervene properly or reasonably, you could have a pretty massive lawsuit on your hands. And so I think that's one question that we need to be looking at is, does the software company monitor this for threats? If so, do they alert the district? Who do they alert? Is it more than one person? What kind of resources does your district have to respond to these threats? A lot of threat assessment is being done by AI. So it's called, we talk about the importance of having a human in the loop, someone who's actually, or it is your IT department gets the alerts. And a lot of IT folks are like, I have zero training in what is a genuine self-harm threat. I have no psychology background, so it is that is also, this topic is going to be a whole separate webinar on how to build a robust threat assessment response team, AI tools. And so AI is also being used quite a bit in all these online counseling tools that school districts are offering. They often have AI generated responses. They are monitored by AI. So again, it's really important that we talk about whose responsibility, what level, how they do their assessment, how they do their response. And then what's really interesting, the last point on here, I review. So part of my job is to review those the threat assessment tools and their response. I have read contracts. Here's a legal horror story, in my opinion, that the contract said it was a service that did nothing but monitor the district's network for threats, but it was all AI monitored. And it said, we assume zero responsibility for detecting threats or for failing to notify the district. And I was like, well, then what good is this product? I mean, if we cannot hold you responsible, if somebody drops the ball here, you're paying money to a company to do exactly that. And they're saying that they're not going to assume any responsibility for it. So again, that's an easy contract shifting provision where we're like, no, we're paying, or at least the district's making an informed decision when they adopt the software, like, okay, well, you're using a threat monitoring software, but they're saying that they're not, they can't guarantee, or not even not guaranteed, like they're not even willing to assume responsibility if they, knowingly drop the ball in failing to notify you. So again, something to kind of keep the lookout on the lookout for. And I'll keep moving along. Sorry, I know it's already been 30 minutes. I'm going to try to move quickly through the rest of this, but those are the two first checklist items: data privacy review, threat monitoring review. And then some of these are just more minor things. Is there an age requirement? Let's not put certain AI tools in the hands of elementary school students if it specifically says you have to be 13. To what extent does the platform share data? These are things I've pretty much already talked about. Is there a knowledge base? Is it limited or is it open? Like, these are things maybe your contractor review team or whoever does your reviews your terms and conditions. The fourth one here is something we've been asked a lot. Do they provide notice that your existing software is being updated with AI? You go to sleep at night and you put your iPhone down on your charger and you wake up the next day and it says it's been updated and you have no idea how. That is usually, a lot of people in your business department are like, give us affirmative notice that you are putting OpenAI on the things we've already contracted for, because it's important that you know that. And of course, do they meet cybersecurity standards? If there's a data breach, you want to make sure that there's some backup for that. So again, this is available to you all. So if you want to go back and take this back to your team as like a checklist of things that they can be reviewing. And then these are general contract terms. So I just want to mention length of agreement. A lot of contracts, I know I'm based out of California. You're not allowed to have a contract that's more than 5 years. So you want to make sure you're not getting locked into a 10 or 15-year agreement. Make sure that somebody's taking a look at that. Does it require board approval? The state I'm in requires approval of all contracts. Hidden costs and fees, like I mentioned, there's licensing fees. There's, the $9 million contract they didn't realize was for $9 million. Termination rights and penalties. So that, again, to give that example, they did not realize that it said this is a 5-year contract, and if you terminate early, you still owe the entire balance. Well, how does that help anybody? You have to pay for 5 years of service and you're going to use it for one. So that's something. And then liability caps and indemnification rights. That goes back to the threat monitoring example I gave, where if they have a data breach or they fail, it's a threat monitoring service and they fail to alert you of a threat, they should assume some responsibility. And that's where the indemnification comes in. And you want to make sure that they will, if the district gets sued and it's not your fault, it's the software company's fault, they will step in and defend a lawsuit. They will pay the legal fees. And that is not, again, that's something your lawyer should be looking out for. But I know every school district doesn't have general counsel or doesn't use outside counsel, but it's a real critical term if there is a challenge. Okay. Last slide, I promise, almost the last slide before we turn to questions, is maybe not so much a contract review checklist, but a checklist that should also be considered before things are put into the classroom. Does the district have the resources to offer AI tools equitably? I mentioned the FAFSA chatbot rolled out by the state of California that was going to go to student phones, all their iPhones. Well, not every student has an iPhone. You can't offer it to some students and not others. So just double check that you have the platform. Can you put it on their one-to-one device? Can you put it on your website? Make sure that all students have access to whatever AI tool the district is offering. Is it free of bias? So this is where the teachers need to come in. And AI or generative AI, that the content being rolled out to students isn't biased. There's a really good example where there's a pixelated image of Barack Obama, and somebody asked ChatGPT to clean up the photo, make it less pixelated, and it turned it into a Caucasian male. And it was Barack Obama. And it just shows you that there's this inherent bias sometimes in AI. And then accuracy. You all may already know this, but ChatGPT, OpenAI, they want to know the answer, and if they don't, it makes it up. They make up case citations. If you're doing a lesson plan on the Civil War, you don't want it to be making up dates and battle names, but it will if it doesn't know the answer. And so that's still where it's really important that our teachers come in, that if they're using AI as a tool, they make sure it's free of bias, they make sure it's accurate before they put it in the hands of students. And of course, guidelines for academic integrity, if this is to write your original final essay, we don't want students, maybe, I mean, some teachers don't want students using generative AI to write their essays. That is going to be on a case-by-case basis, what teachers and school districts are comfortable with, but we don't want academic dishonesty and cheating, And then finally, a lot of school districts have digital literacy programs, and a real big concern for a lot of school districts is either misinformation or deep fakes. There has been cases recently where students as young as middle school are generating nude images with students' faces on it. And, that's cyberbullying, that's sexting, that's child pornography. It is something that school districts really need to be prepared to respond to work with the software provider, but also just misinformation, how to spot fake articles, fake images. We actually get a lot of questions from school board members who are doing election campaigns about they're concerned about people doing deep fakes. So, but I think that's all part of digital literacy is how can we, what strategies are there to help students know that not to believe everything you read on the internet, really, but especially now with AI, how easy it is to do that. And so before I turn to Q&A, I just want to mention some of the things that, again, as a lawyer, like what my role is in legal resources is we help with the policy and the guidelines. We do the contract review process, we do data privacy compliance, and we do the staff training. And again, my practice is dedicated to education technology. I did want to mention, because we've administrators on the line here, we represented the California School Board Association on a case that just went to the US Supreme Court. And this is just sort of like a news alert. There is a new standard for school board members on how they engage on social media and when it becomes what their free speech rights are. So that's a totally separate issue. But if you want more information, I put our website on here and my email address, because I think it's something that we're getting a lot of questions aside from AI is about school board member use of social media. But with that, I want to make sure I get to all of our questions that we might have. Amelia, do you want to read off the questions, or do you?
I'll go ahead and read them off. So folks, go ahead. If you haven't already, dropped your questions in the Q&A. I want to start just by saying, thank you, Gretchen. This might be the most valuable AI and education presentation I have been in for the past 2 years, which is, I've been in a lot of presentations, I promise you. So not bad praise, but so was curious, in one of your previous slides, you mentioned asking about the knowledge base.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about what you mean by a knowledge base?
Yes, and again, I am not a engineer, and I'm a lawyer, just a lawyer here, but I'm an education technology lawyer, and so my understanding of the way it works, and so I say that because there could be more knowledgeable people on the line here, so anyone else is welcome to jump in and put it in the chat. But so, for example, I don't mean to pick on ChatGPT, but ChatGPT is getting smarter rapidly, and so a student, let's say, will put something in a prompt, and they type in a question or it's something that it wants ChatGPT to spit out, and it will come up with an answer. And then a student may refine that answer and rebuild it or rephrase it. And ChatGPT globally is collecting all of that information and getting smarter and smarter and smarter. So, well, an example with the law is it will use inaccurate case names. So I might say, draft a legal brief, which this is not how I practice law, but draft a legal brief about AI in education, and it will make up cases. And I might put back into it, no, tell me about this particular pending IP case that I know is happening. Well, I just made ChatGPT smarter. So the next lawyer that comes around and asks for ChatGPT to draft a legal brief about IP issues, intellectual property issues with the use of AI in education, it now knows the case name. I built its knowledge base. And so that is where student data is being is becoming a part of the knowledge base, which isn't necessarily bad so long as you have parental permission. But let's say I want to do student discipline. Okay, I have a student who brought this type of weapon to campus. What should be the punishment, or what do you suggest, Chat GPT? How should I talk to the parents about this? But then later on, another teacher could ask the same question, and it will use that disciplinary recommendation, or maybe what type of weapon was used, to solve the same problem for somebody else. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. That's great. Thank you. A question from our audience. So, if students download AI powered software on their school owned devices, what liability does that open up for schools? And I'll add, in addition to download, if they access them on their devices as well.
I think I think it's a good idea for school districts to have guidelines, which is, we don't want students inadvertently downloading tools that don't meet school district standards. So, and I've talked about a lot of horror stories, but what if it just has an age requirement? What if it's 18 and over? You would not, just like you wouldn't want them downloading sports betting app on their school device. Really open generative AI tools is something that I do think a district should have a system in place saying, because Chat GPT, for example, may be acceptable in some circumstances in education, but not all. And so do you want to make it available on their tool? Maybe, maybe not. Every district has a different expectation, but I think the different tools there should also still be a part of the vetting process. I think it's not a bad idea for school districts to say, before you download any software, it needs to be on our existing approved list, or, you can request it, but, we don't want students just downloading things willy-nilly without making sure that they're safe first. Amelia, you might have more to say on that as well.
I'll leave it because we've got a couple more questions and
Okay.
only a couple more minutes. So, how willing are companies to change their terms to fit school requirements? And do schools have the bargaining power to make this happen, or how can they get it?
I love that question because that is what I do for a living. So what I tell them, they're in the business of, especially educational AI. They're in the business of trying to reach students. And I'm like, help me help you. I'm not trying to say you can't operate in schools, but you've got to tweak these terms. You do not, it's bad PR. It's not good for business to say that you've put something in the hands of students that isn't safe or doesn't meet student data privacy standards. So I find they actually are pretty receptive to changing their terms, but usually it's power in numbers. So in California, I'm general counsel for California IT and Education. It's like 1,000 school districts. Or you have AASA, who is, if you can work through your organizations to say, hey, our members really want to use your tools, but we have concerns about X, Y, or Z. They're running a business, and usually they want to be compliant. And what's interesting, a lot of ed tech vendors are actually coming to me directly saying, I want to roll out this product. Gretchen, can you help us make sure that it's safe to use in schools? And so there's also a race to regulate. Amelia, you and I were talking about this offline before. There's a ton of new laws coming down the pike for software companies to put more responsibility on them, particularly like in the deep fake and the misinformation space, that it'll empower educators to be able to have more access to reach them to say, take this down, or this is false information, and that all the burden shouldn't be on the school districts financially and time-wise. It should be more responsibility on the software companies.
Absolutely.
Great question.
All right, last question before we end today. How should teachers navigate integrating AI into their classrooms when some parents might consent, but others do not?
Again, a great question. So if it is closed AI, I do think you don't necessarily need parent permission. And that is the trend for educational software companies. They're starting to figure it out that
And a
it's
quick
better.
question,
Yeah.
Gretchen, how what are maybe the different ways or the different words that might be used to show that something is closed AI? Like what is a question to ask in order to figure that out in the first place? Is it, are you sharing information back with Chat GPT or others? I assume like that's maybe one way, but are there others as well?
So, and that's kind of in the nuances of the contract review, but resharing, who is data reshared with? Does it build a knowledge base outside of the school district? I think are the two. I mean, that's really, is it open? Is it being reshared with the universe? Is it building a knowledge base that's used outside the school district? Will tell us if it's open or closed. So if it's closed just to your school environment, you're fine. I don't think you still need to do data privacy review, but you don't necessarily need to get parent permission. If it is open generative AI, like a Chat GPT, then the tool should not be required for an assignment. It should be a supplemental option because you're not going to get 100% parent permit. I'm a parent of 3 kids. I barely can remember to turn in the permission slips. And it's not because I don't care. I mean, that I'm not agreeing to it. I just can't remember. So you're not going to get 100% of slips turned in. And so it comes down to making sure that it's not a required tool. It's something that students can use to supplement education. But, I get it. It is tremendously more advanced than other tools. I hate to say than going to the library, but library, you'd have to be able to read every single book in the library to keep up with OpenAI. Any other questions, Amelia?
I think that's it. Any final words for us?
And if you have individualized questions, you can reach out to me. You can reach out to Amelia. I'm going to put my my email address in the chat real quick. And, I'm here in California, but we work with school districts all over the country if anybody gets any follow-up questions.
Wonderful. Thank you, Gretchen.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here. And the next 2 webinars I think we are doing are specific to special education and specific to threat assessment, because I think that's the 2 biggest areas of legal exposure for school districts with AI.
Absolutely. All right. Well,
Thank you so
thank you
much.
all for attending. Thank you, Gretchen, so much. And hope you all have a wonderful rest of your Monday.
You too. Take care. Bye-bye.